Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome to 7th Street. So, as I'm sure you can tell from the title of this video or the clickbait art that I had up there, we're going to be talking about 7th Street Productions' top 5 overrated horror films. Now, when I say overrated, that doesn't mean disliked. I don't hate or dislike any of these films. In fact, all 5 of them I admire in their own way. I just tend to think that people overhype these films a little bit, that they're not as deserving of their place in history or pop culture that people give them. So I can't stress that enough. This is just my opinion, and that's the great thing about an opinion, is it's just an opinion. This doesn't make me right or wrong, and you know, I'm not trying to be like a snob or a hipster about this. I mean, nobody likes to not be in on the joke. I would love to appreciate these movies the way that a lot of other people appreciate them. I just, for whatever reason, don't. So this is 7th Street Productions' top 5 overrated horror films. Number 5, I have Rosemary's Baby.
Paramount Pictures presents Mia Farrow in a William Castle production, Rosemary's Baby.
I know that I'm going to get a lot of people that really disagree with this one. Once again, I cannot reiterate this enough. I enjoy this movie. I think that it's beautiful. It was produced by William Castle, one of my heroes.
God is dead! Satan lives! The year is one!
You know, there's not a ton going on there for me. And every time I say that, I always have people, especially film student type people, who are always saying things like, well, you don't get it. It's about feminism. It's about nonconformity. It's about the changing times for everybody in the 60s. Okay? And I mean, Birdemic has messages about anti-global warming. You know, it doesn't make me like the movie anymore. Like I said, I think that it's a pretty film. I think that it's well acted. And I think, obviously, Roman Polanski is an extremely talented director. But you constantly see this movie, not just on, you know, top 100 horror films. You see it on some people's lists for top 100 films ever made. It's not the groundbreaker that everybody gives it credit for.
Shut up, you're in Dubrovnik. I don't hear you.
William Castle produced this film. He bought the rights to the book, and he really wanted to direct it. It took Roman Polanski convincing him to let him give Roman Polanski the job. William Castle really wanted to direct this film, and perhaps he should have. At number 4, I have The Exorcist. I'm sure at this second I've had more than half of my viewers close this video out, but at least let me explain myself. I think that The Exorcist is a great movie. Not a good movie, it's a great movie. It's absolutely phenomenal. It is definitely in conversation for the top 10 greatest horror movies ever made. The reason that I think that it is a little overhyped, a little overrated, is consistently you see people rating this as the greatest horror movie of all time, which just rubs me the wrong way. You know, greater than Psycho? Greater than Night of the Living Dead? Suspiria? I mean, I consider Dracula, the original Dracula, Todd Browning's Dracula with Bela Lugosi, is easily one of the most important horror movies ever made. So, for The Exorcist to consistently be ranked as number 1 just rings a little bit false to me. That being said, this is a great film. I'm in no way saying that it's bad or boring or not scary. It's definitely all of those things. And, you know, I'll be the first to admit that, you know, I wasn't around when it first came out. I mean, I saw this movie for the first time in 2003 when I was 11 years old. So, you know, I I didn't grow up with the revolution that kind of came with this movie, and I'm sure that it is extremely important to the history of horror, and it is a great film, but I just can't put it at the number 1 spot. I don't even know if I can put it in the top 5. Does The Exorcist make the top 10 horror films of all time? Maybe. Alright, at number 3 I have Cabin in the Woods.
Everybody ready? Get the show on the road!
Cabin in the Woods is a good movie. It's perfectly fine to watch. It's kind of like those scary movies in a certain way. They're really, really reference dense. But once again, it's not the groundbreaker that a lot of people make it out to be. I see all these quotes for it, like the best horror comedy since Shaun of the Dead, and all of these things, and it was just so overhyped when it came out. I mean, people acted like they had never seen anything like this before. The stoner makes it to the end, and it's like, it just wasn't, it didn't mean that much to me. Everything was pretty much a reference. Everything was a reference to The Evil Dead, or, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, it's become sort of a thing for people on YouTube channels to point out all the different monsters that are locked away in this underground laboratory. And it just kind of becomes like fanfare, it's kind of like, kind of jerking yourself off, nobody else is in on the joke, only horror fans will get this, which is fine, but that's just what it is. I don't think that it's one of the better horror films of the 2000s. I just don't. I didn't really see the hype for it, and everybody says, oh, it explains the horror movie mythos and the rules, and sort of, not really. I mean, it doesn't tell us anything else that we didn't know other than apparently there's this whole Illuminati thing going on with virgins, but, it just referenced the tropes in my mind. It just referenced the stoner and the jock and the virgin. And kind of at the end, they sort of explain, oh, this all has something to do with the story and there's a reason it's this way. But it didn't do anything new for me. So that's why I have Cabin in the Woods at number 3. At number 2, I have The Babadook.
If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook.
And once again, I actually like this film. It's perfectly fine. It's not great by any means, but it's a perfectly good horror film. My big beef with it, and the reason that I consider it to be overrated, is the fact that, number one, everybody just gushes over this film. Still, people gush over, the allegory for it, and, oh, it's about depression, losing a loved one. It's, and it's not that good. It was a decent film for the year that it was made, I suppose. And the other reason is it completely overshadows a lot of the other horror films that came out in 2015. And I think that was a pretty good year for horror films. People come away saying that it was the best one, without a doubt. You look at lists and everybody puts The Babadook 2015's best horror film, which I don't think so at all. First and foremost, It Follows, I think, is by far and away the best horror film to come from 2015. I think that It Follows is one of the better films from the 2000s, just in my opinion. I think that it did something new for the genre. It created sort of its own subgenre. It was definitely a callback to John Carpenter films and 80s horror, and it kind of lived in its own ambiguous universe. I thought that it did new things. The Babadook felt like kind of a cookie-cutter ghost film that has been coming out recently. It doesn't feel too far removed from movies like The Ring and The Grudge and Shudder, where it's, you know, here's this haunted thing, and is the haunting real or not, and it affects just a mother and her son. There are a lot of parallels between Babadook and a lot of the J-horror remakes of the recent past. So, you know, I don't consider it to be some groundbreaking film. I don't consider it to be this, you know, phenomenal, terrifying ghost movie. You know, it is right on par with most of the 2000s paranormal films, you know. And I feel like there were other films in 2015 that probably should be rated a little bit higher. I'll probably get, you know, scolded for it, but I also think that, you know, The Green Inferno could be in that conversation. At least it's bringing back a genre that has been long dead. You know, maybe it has a little bit more of an impact than something like The Babadook, which was just sort of poppy. It was a poppy horror film. And at number 1, I have It. Here. Take it. What else? What else was I going to put at number 1? Once again, I don't hate this film. It's probably the one that I like the least out of all the films on this list, and it's probably the one that at the moment is getting the most amount of buzz. I understand that that's because it is the most recent of any of these films to come out, but also remember that it is now the highest grossing horror film of all time. And I was really stoked for this movie. I actually really thought that I was really going to enjoy it. I'm not a super cynical person. I really want to like these films. But it didn't do a whole lot for me. Like I said, I was super excited to go see it. I saw it opening day at Cinetopia. For those of you who don't live in the Northwest, I don't know if they have Cinetopias elsewhere, but it's a super fancy theater that we go to. So I spent money, I went to Cinetopia, I was super excited to see it, had a couple of beers, was really open to the experience, and was a little disappointed. Was a lot disappointed, actually. The CGI, I think, at the time, I tried to tell myself, well, it's not that bad, but it is. It is. It doesn't look very good, and it just makes the film look cheaper, you know, especially with all the kids floating in the deadlights, Pennywise dancing down in the sewer, you know, his teeth coming out. There were points where it looked like a Sci-Fi Channel original movie. The CGI in that was not very good. And to be honest, I think the reason that this movie is so popular is because the filmmaker was very smart in that he basically ripped off Stranger Things. I mean, people have really glommed on to Stranger Things, and it's a fantastic show, and, you know, people are just sort of itching for that type of Goonies coming-of-age tale. You know, it's kind of the second cycle of those, you know, Brat Pack films with Molly Ringwald, which is fine, but I think that people are getting swept up a little bit in that. And actually, just about an hour ago, I was rewatching the movie Super 8, Steven Spielberg's Super 8, which is basically the same thing. It's basically the same movie, and it feels like something that's going to die off, I hope, in the next couple of years, that the popularity for it will fade back, and people will remember it for what it should be remembered for, which is another remake, and something that is okay, but is still not as good as the original. Well, there you have it, guys. 7th Street Productions' top 5 overrated horror films. I know that some of you guys are probably really pissed at me right now, so make sure that you leave me a comment below telling me why you're so pissed off. Also, leave a comment letting us know what you think some overrated horror films are. I definitely like to hear from you guys. Make sure that you like and subscribe, share the video, tell your friends about us, find us on Facebook, go to our website, 7thstreetfilms.com. We've also got some new movies coming out, some of which you can stream for free on our YouTube page. So, yeah, until next time, guys.
You know what she did? Your canting daughter?